Okay, so we are good to go. So why don't you just go ahead and start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, thanks for asking me to do this, Sammy. I know that I probably have seen a lot of folks already, either over the airwaves or in person, but my name is Scott Scheer, Dr. Scott Scheer. I've been a faculty member here at Ohio State, I like to say for a couple decades or so. When I give the exact year, it just seems a little old to me, so I'm just going to say a couple decades or so. And I'm glad to be here. And just a little bit about my background in degrees. I have 3 different degrees from 3 different institutions. One is a Bachelor's of Science from Louisiana Tech University, and then a master's degree from Columbia University Teachers College in developmental psychology. And then I have a PhD from the University of Delaware. Focus was on youth and families. And then I taught there a little bit as an instructor, but my first regular tenure track job was here at Ohio State University. And anyway, that's just a little bit about myself in regards to my degrees and background.
Oh, that's good. Okay, so the next question. So can you talk to me a little bit about your research when you were doing, your undergrad, your graduate, and your doctorate, and then what you are currently doing with it?
Sure. Yeah, I guess I first caught the research bug when I was working on my master's degree, and I ended up getting a really an hourly position in a human development, I guess, lab, you could say, that was looking at parent-child interactions that was actually being videotaped. And the professor I was working for, she had a NSF grant, a National Science Foundation grant, and I ended up doing a master's project. It was probably very much like a thesis, but we called it a master's project. And that's where I used some things that I was coding into a database, looking at the parent-child interaction and actually learning around language development. And what my research was about was looking at language development, and ended up finding that the types of toys that the children were playing with, it affected the types of communication interaction between the parent and the child. And we found that that was related to language growth. And we found that the girls, on average, they were learning language quicker than the boys. And we found that it had to do with the types of girl-type toys, dolls and so forth, that were eliciting questions from the parent to the child, where it seemed like the boy-type toys, well, it seemed they were, like trucks and whatnot, push the truck, was creating directives, do this, do that. And what we know from the research, at least over time, is that the interactions that elicited questions, it promotes language growth and learning and development as compared to directives or imperatives where you're just making statements about something. But anyway, I won't go off too far on that. But that really got me interested in doing research. I actually got a grant, a dean's grant there at the university that helped me with my research. And from there, I worked as a social worker with youth and families for just a year until I worked on my PhD. And then, of course, with a PhD degree, and that's really something for any of our PhD students, it really is about research. And you'll notice here we have a lot of research classes. It was the same for me when I was doing my PhD way back when at the University of Delaware. But I ended up doing a cross-national study between the U.S. and Russia, looking at the role of the family environment and youth development and adolescent development. And we actually found similar results based upon studies here in the U.S. and the study that was done with youth and families over in Russia. And so I was able to publish with that. And also when I was working on my PhD, and again, something you don't have to do, but one can consider other research studies to do beyond just the dissertation. One of the things that I looked at when I was working on my PhD was around the realm of transition to adulthood, from adolescence to adulthood, and what that means. And this was back in the mid-90s. There weren't really too many studies around that. And we did it from both a qualitative approach where we had some open-ended questions about to the study participants, to them, what it means to be an adult, but also just some other survey questionnaire type responses that we could use together. And we found that it's not just a simple picture of I turned 21, or that I had a baby, or I got married. Those are important. We found that, though, that it's not just that, but it also has to do what we call cognitive or psychological influences about feeling mature, making your own decisions, and that kind of thing. But anyway, I'm gonna watch my time here a little bit, Sammy.
You're fine.
I'm just on my PhD, right? We got everything else left. So no, I'll but anyway, so certainly for our PhD students, masters too. Yes, you do want to think about whether it's your master's thesis or project, or around your dissertation. You want to start thinking about that. Most students here are just getting started. Doesn't mean that you know exactly. I know I didn't know exactly when I started my graduate programs what I was going to do research on. And that research has continued. I typically try to publish a couple articles a year. Some years it might be one, another year it might be four. Mm-hmm. So it just depends on that particular year and what's sort of in the pipeline. But what's nice about doing research is that you do want to get it into the record. Even though you might hear about institutions like Ohio State, publish or perish, publishing is still important because it's then in the record. So when I work with my students, if you look at my Vita, which is online, you'll notice that a lot of the publications, especially since I've been here at Ohio State, they're with students. It's around their thesis. It's around maybe even their project. It's around their PhD dissertations. And again, you'll see that probably with some of my very recent publications and whatnot. I've got my Vita that I just opened up right here and I'm looking at. And that's important. And I think you'll find faculty here want to do that. We want to promote you. A lot of us, we want to do well and do well for the department and ourselves. But for us, we put students first. And by helping you all launch your careers, whether that's in a professional career in extension, or whether it's working in an academic unit in a university, all of that's important. And so that's something that usually happens once you've completed some research, whether it's with your master's degree or with your dissertation. The area that I research around, broad areas, is around youth development, which can include children and through adolescents, and then also outreach education or non-formal education. Right. So you'll see a lot of my research and publications are around those areas, broadly speaking, whether it's looking at programs for youth and the outcomes that are associated with them or not, or maybe it's around outreach education and what we're doing in regards to developing, for example, extension professionals. Some of the research that I've done was like a national Delphi study a few years ago with some colleagues at other institutions that was looking at what are the necessary competencies to be successful in outreach education and extension. And that was a national Delphi study. And so that was very useful because it certainly informed us what we're doing here at Ohio State University, but then we're also able to publish that and share that certainly to a broader audiences. So around youth development and outreach education would be my research focus areas. How am I doing on time?
Doing good. Doing good.
Probably over just a little bit, so I know maybe just a few more questions or one more.
Well, you touched base on my last question, which was, how are graduate students likely to participate? So you basically, said that if there's somebody interested, there's a faculty member out there that is willing to work with students and help with their research, because if they haven't done it, they can definitely direct you to somebody who has experience in that area. So you touched base on that. So
yeah, you bet. So don't hesitate. Whether I'm working with students or even if it's somebody else. I know everybody has what we initially call a temporary advisor. Work with that person, but feel free to communicate with other faculty too. And that's what's nice about this assignment, so that folks can look at not just what we're talking about in my regard, but you can hear from other faculty and what they're doing, and that's very important. So, but I do recommend, still primarily, make sure you communicate with your temporary advisor, get feedback, and that will include, communicating with other folks. This assignment will help with that because you'll be able to see these videos. And as you're thinking about your master's thesis or project or dissertation, that can be that dialogue between you and your advisor, and then you're working toward that program plan, which I think will be talked about this Friday in class, where you're going to have your a committee meeting eventually, where if you're a master's student, it would be with your advisor and at least one committee member. And if you're a PhD student, it's going to be with your advisor and then 3 other folks. One is outside, and the other 2 are going to be usually within the department, but you'll learn more about that. And that doesn't happen right away because you're not sure who to even ask.
You're right.
But certainly for a master's student, it's not going to happen right away. Maybe it's we say, after maybe 2 semesters, or maybe during your second semester. It just depends where you're at. For PhD students, you're having more people on that committee, so that can sometimes take even a little bit longer until you have firmed that up. I do recommend, though, that you don't, wait right up until you're trying to, finish things, because then it's sort of a mad dash in getting things where you want it. And keep in mind, too, that your advisor and your committee is there to help you with your research, to be that sounding board. And again, our main goal is for the graduate students, to be successful and to get your degree.
Yes.
Because that, of course, is going to help the students, but it also helps us.
Exactly.
I mean, that helps us because we are producing quality students who are graduating.
Yeah.
And so keep that in mind, even if at times, folks might get frustrated. That Dr. Scheer, that Scott, he's wanting this or that. It's to help you finish and to be successful.
Yes.
So just keep that in mind. All right, what else, Sammy?
That's all I have. So,
okay.
Well, thank you.
Of course, I hope I didn't go too long.
No, you'll be fine. So, it was all very important information, so we'll gladly take it. So, but thank you again for, I would say coming in, but joining me this morning on the Zoom. So, thank you once again.
Thanks, Sammy.